So welcome. We are starting at 10:04. Seth, do you want to do roll call? Those of you who are joining us on the phone, will you please mute your phones?
Yvonne Curtis.
Present.
Mark Mulvihill.
That's what you mean, right?
David Reeves.
Here.
Lynn Saxton.
Here.
Kay Turan.
Here.
Kim Williams.
Okay. Please make sure your phones are muted. So the first thing I'll do is take a motion to approve the agenda.
I so move.
Okay, I had two moves, so I'll take one of those as a second. All right. Lynn moved and Kay Turan seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay. All those in favor of moving forward the agenda, please say aye.
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 Lynn, I'm assuming that you said aye.
I am. I actually have a new phone, so I'm trying to mute it. So I think I was doing that when you couldn't hear me.
Okay, so if David and Lynn want to keep yours unmuted while we finish going through approval of the meeting notes. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the October 14th meeting notes, which we did not do at last meeting because we did not have a quorum.
I so move.
Thank you. I need a second. Anybody opposed to moving forward? Was that Lynn?
Yeah, that
Was the second? Okay.
was. And that's the.
She's in. Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
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 Get out of here.
Okay. Thank you. Those minutes are approved. Now we'll look for approval of the minutes of November 18th, which was our last meeting. Again, I'm looking for a motion.
I so move again.
Thank you, Kay. A second?
Second.
Thank you from Lynn. Anybody opposed to moving forward on approval of the meeting notes of the November 18th? Okay. So that's approved as well. We're going to move to 4.0 old business. We have 8 minutes to go through just reviewing the Smarter Balance proposal for placement test waivers. And we had some discussion at the last meeting. We did not have a quorum to endorse any kind of moving forward with this proposal. I'm making the assumption that all committee members have had a chance to read the documents from last week. And so I'm just going to summarize really quickly what the approval is that we're looking for. So the proposal was that high school students would have the opportunity to use their passing scores on the 11th grade Smarter Balance assessment to take college level courses in their senior year. The second part of that recommendation is that students who are not ready would receive some additional supports in their senior year so they would be college and career ready. So we're looking for support from this committee to move forward on or to endorse the idea. Some of the technical issues are still being resolved, but basically we're looking at the concept. So discussion from the committee?
I just have a procedural question, which is whether this endorsement is and implementation is reflected in Dr. Golden's kind of work plan tied to budget priorities for the coming biennium.
I'm going to ask Hilda to respond to that.
So this is called out in the grades 11 through 14 work plan that Rob Saxton and Ben shared with the OEIB. It does not, at this point, it is getting funding from a grant called Core to College. And primarily at this point, Lynn, there will be memorandums of agreements that would be signed by community college and four-year institution presidents So there's not like a big price tag on this, and we anticipate that the funding that we have now will carry through on this. There are some other pieces that may pick up support for the student supports that were referenced.
Which is in part 2 of that.
Okay, thank you.
So, Hilda, can you clarify a little bit more what would be the memorandums of agreement with the college presidents or university presidents, for example?
So we are following.
Is it still voluntary? Would it still be voluntary on their part, or leave some room to better define the terms or how they're accepting those, or what?
So what I would probably suggest is that you take a look again at the summary that we provided at the November meeting. We actually are following very closely the work of both the state of Washington and California, both of whom are handling the same work. So we provided you with an example of Washington's agreement. And just to summarize real quickly, first of their agreement outlines that, first of all, the colleges endorse an agreement, I'm trying to find the exact words, to offer high school students the opportunity to use their scores on the 11th grade Smarter Balanced Assessment to establish their readiness for college-level coursework when entering higher ed institutions. They talk about, for them, they've talked about when that agreement would be in effect. It starts for their graduating class of 16 through 2018, and then they're going to reconsider that formally in 2018 based on student performance data. And it only applies to students who are admitted and enrolled in a post-secondary institution immediately following high school graduation, that next academic year. So that's kind of the format that we're looking at as a possible model for Oregon. And then the chart that we've shared with you would probably be listed as part of an addendum to the Memorandum of Understanding.
So just to further flesh out, I think, David's question, I want to be clear that I think what he's also asking is to what extent would institutions have to sign on, or would there be any authority at the state level requiring institutions to accept that?
What we are hoping is that this is something, because it's been engaged in a lot of conversations with folks around the state, that it would not be something that's mandated. It's something that people would want to be part of.
Does that help
Thank
you,
you.
David?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it.
Okay. So about agreement and consensus versus a mandate. So would that be part of what we want to include in our endorsement of that too?
I think what you might want to do is that you're endorsing a concept, and that you're asking to have updates provided to you regularly, and that you would have a chance to look at any draft memorandum of agreement before it goes out. That seems like a way that you can keep a close look at it, get a sense of, is it doing what it's supposed to be doing?
Yes, this is Kay. Yes, I really do endorse that second piece, that if we're approving something in concept, we should have a draft MOU to come back to us to see if it's in its final draft form.
Right. And that should come out of the technical implementation group that's meeting to kind of deal with timelines, registrar transcripting issues. And so we could ask them to come back and present that to you again.
And so after we finish this conversation, we're going to go to moving to our tracking sheet, which is where we're sort of keeping track of what we're asking groups to do. So keep that in mind, if you will, committee members, so that we can sort of use this as one step to kind of vet that tracking sheet to see if that's going to help us get where we want and making sure that we're moving forward. Any other comments from the committee? Okay, so I'm looking for a motion to endorse this idea in concept.
So moved.
Okay, a second, please.
I second.
Okay, David's moved and Kay's seconded. All those in favor, oh, I'm sorry, any more discussion on this item before we take a vote? Okay, all of those in favor, and I'll listen for each voice on the phone. Those in favor of moving forward this concept of using smarter balance for placement in Oregon?
Aye.
Aye.
I think I heard you, Lynn. I did hear David and Kay. Lynn, did you say aye?
Yes.
Thank you. And mine is
Aye.
aye as well, so we've got four, all four of us. So we're going to move to agenda item 6.0, which is the subcommittee tracking sheet. that I
So
just
this
referred
was
to.
in response to actually some suggestions from Lynn Saxton at the conclusion of our year last year, that we do tighten up some processes to track our scope of action and for the year, and to be very clear and enunciating what we're doing, who's doing what, timelines, etc. So this is a rough attempt at filling in the tracking sheet and getting a sense of progress that we're making. So I wanted you to look at it to decide, is this going to do what the committee wants it to do? So I filled in the items from last meeting.
So I'm just going to read across the top. Welcome, Nancy. Nancy Golden, Dr. Nancy Golden has just joined us, for those of you on the phone. So I'm just going to read across the top so we can think about each one, and let's apply what we just talked about as an idea of vetting whether we need anything else on here. So what we would do first is identify what transition or barrier are we working to fix. So the barrier on this one, for example, would be placements, and we'd be offering an alternative for some students to some of the options that are already out there. The next column is, how does this align with the subcommittee charge? So we would look back to our chart to see, was this something that was a part of our charge? Are we staying on point with that? And how does this work link to one or more of the OEIB outcomes on the Achievement Compact? We want to identify who is the point person or organization that's working on this, so that Hilda knows who we're going to be asking to give us these reports, updates, and bring us any drafts of items that, well, Hilda would put together a draft of anything we wanted to vote on. The next column is the progress to date. So, for example, on this one, we would ask for a report to come out and give us progress, and to identify their next steps, which is the next column, and to possibly give us maybe a date when there might be something we would recommend and move forward to the full OEIB. Is there anything else the committee thinks needs to be on this sheet? Remember, this was to hold us accountable and to be able to see the through line between what are we doing in this committee, how does it get to OEIB, and how does it impact our 40-40-20 goal as measured by the Achievement Compact.
And so I'm putting under next steps, since this, what you see in this document is basically based on the November meeting. So as of December now, I'm adding next steps, that we would be requesting a draft of the MOU and a report from the Technical Implementation Committee work.
Okay. Lynn, David, anything you want to add to this, or questions you want to ask about this tracking sheet?
No, I think it's very helpful. Thank you. I appreciate you generating it.
Well, thank you for your
I
very
agree.
specific questions, because that, I think, helped us get to this point.
You
Yeah,
will-
I agree. It's very helpful.
Great.
You may
Okay.
note that at the last meeting, when we did get answers around the questions that you raised for SBAC alignment, that you also commented on the 13-page document laying out the array of placement tests and cutoff scores. And I tried to translate that into page 2. So tell me if that captures it. I think that you're requesting an updated chart, and that you'd like some discussion with HEC staff Higher Ed Coordinating Commission staff as they move forward on aligning placement tests, revising processes, etc.
Any questions about that? Did you want to say anything more about the other two areas?
The other one, remember Serena Stoudemire Wesley and her colleagues came forward and presented to you and told you that you will be getting results from their focus groups on chronic absenteeism. We think that'll be in January, but we're keeping a placeholder for it, January, February, whenever they're at a point ready to do that. And then lastly, we talked about the fact that when the ODE Equity Unit updated you last time, they talked about the need for more bilingual teachers. I actually do have an update for you on that that's rather interesting. The Higher Ed Coordinating Commission is considering a draft model for outcome-based funding for public four-year institutions. And one of the factors that would play into that performance funding is to what degree are the institutions graduating candidates to meet high-need areas for employment in our state. And I noted during the discussion last week, that bilingual educators is on that list tentatively. So I just thought you would want to know that that's another action being taken by one of the state agencies to address the needs.
Is there anything we need to do as a subcommittee of OEIB to endorse that work, or is that too granular?
I think when they get to a point of finalizing that, we'll ask Ben Cannon to have somebody from his staff present that to you.
Okay.
And we'll monitor to make sure it doesn't fall off the page.
Okay, great. And we know that whole piece about everything required and needed for ELL students is a major strand of our work plan. So we'll continue to watch the different pieces. And then the other one, oh, that was the last one. So we're good on that. Any questions from the committee on any of those items that we talked about in the last meeting? Some of you didn't have the opportunity to comment on them. Okay, not hearing any questions, I'm going to move forward to item 7.0, which is the draft of college and career readiness action agenda, and I'll turn it to Hilda. Walk us through the documents.
I start to apologize and then I say no, I can't apologize. You've got quite a few pieces of material to review for this meeting, and as you've requested, this meeting is representing how you dig deeply into a topic that is impacting 11 through 14 student progress. And we've kind of clustered a lot of these activities around the work that Ben Cannon and Rob Saxton presented to the full OEIB on a plan for 11 through 14 grades. We're also mirroring another effort that had been going on for some time. You may recall you adopted a college career readiness definition. That was supported, developed, and vetted and disseminated from a group that meets on a monthly basis at OEIB, and it's made up of representatives from the state agencies, but also a number of individuals who do work in the area of college career readiness. And what we found is that group has been very helpful in concretizing an action plan. Ironically, Ben's and Rob's came out about the same time we were drafting ours, and it's very similar, it's very parallel. What you'll notice, though, that I sent you first was a 2-pager from WICHE and Education Commission of the States. WICHE is the Western Interstate Commission on Higher Education. We are one of several states in that consortium. Actually, Cam Preuss, Ryan Deckard, and myself serve as commissioners on WICHE. And we had a presentation at our last meeting from the Education Commission of the States in which they outline the kinds of steps that they see states taking to further college career readiness. So on the back page, you'll see all of the states that are covered in the WICHE areas, and then you'll see where we stand in comparison to some of the work that's underway. what you may want to be aware of, even though we have a lot of gaps for the row called Oregon, that there are some activities that are underway. We just don't have them finalized yet. But certainly K-12 accountability, the achievement compacts that are in place for K-12 and soon to be revised for post-secondary education will serve as part of our accountability system.
Can I ask a question before you move on to the next one? Wouldn't our teacher evaluation system also, and admin, the whole educator student learning and growth goals, because they're very much tied to student outcomes and
I am so glad you brought that up.
high stakes.
I'm sure that ECS didn't even think about that piece, so we can alert them to that.
Okay.
Also, we do have work that's underway this year at the Oregon Department of Ed. They should have a final kind of set of recommendations around K-12 graduation requirements. They're relooking at diploma, trying to make sure that SBAC fits in, et cetera. Statewide admission is something that many of the other states have looked at. That is not currently something that Oregon is working on per se. We do have things like transfer agreements, which we get credit for later in the chart. But that may be something that HEC will eventually look at. And then also higher ed accountability, as I just mentioned, there is a proposed performance funding process that's underway in discussion. So eventually that one would receive a star. I just thought it was helpful for you to see our state policies in the context of many of our neighboring states. The next page that you have should,
Before you read that,
Oh, yeah.
just clarify for me then, what additional role does Witchy play? Okay, so they're compiling this information and basically giving
Yes.
us a status report of the different states. Do they play any other role?
They
in terms of
actually
monitoring?
do. Two major things that they've done this year. One is that they were behind what's called the SARA, which is the State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement. What this means is that if you offered a program at your university, the Turan University, and you wanted students to be able to enroll in that program online from other states, there were very cumbersome and expensive processes that your institution would have had to go through on a state-by-state process to reach agreement, just in case a student in South Carolina wanted to enroll in your online program. What Witchy did was they took the leadership role in starting a national conversation about how we refine and streamline those agreements, reducing the cost to universities, making sure that there is accountability, which is the one thing you want. You don't want anybody to be scammed in an online program, so there have to be protections put into place so that if a student is enrolled in a program, they know who to go to if they have a complaint about how the program scammed them or shortchanged them. So that was a major piece of work that they're doing. Oregon is now formally a SARA state. I've forgotten the number now that are now on board with that. I have that in my notes, but I don't have it in my memory. The other thing that they did was that they have been very successful in getting grants to help the western states reach some passport agreements. In other words, there are 10 states that if you achieve outcomes on a general ed course in higher education, those outcomes count for meeting your gen ed requirements, even if you go to another state that's part of a passport agreement.
Transferable.
Right, and what it also says, it's not so much just about the name of the course, but it's about the outcomes. So that we're not caught up in, oh, California doesn't call it that, so we can't be seeing that as the same course. Those are two examples
So we'd be
of
looking
their
at standards
policy
on that.
work. Yep.
All
Okay.
right. Any other questions on that document before Hilda moves to the next one?
So the next one looks like, I don't know, maybe started to say a rainbow, but it's a sunrise with the arrows going towards our goal, which is to help all Oregon students graduate from high school ready for college and careers. So this work has been underway for several months by this cross-sector group that meets once a month. And what they tried to do is to listen closely to some of the questions that were asked at the OEIB board about, well, what are we doing to make sure that every student graduates college career ready? And we've looked at literature, we've looked across states, we've looked at best practices, and outlined 10 big categories of work that we are now monitoring. So you can see when you turn the page that what we're starting to use is a chart that we will monitor and update that tells us where we are, whether or not something's been completed, if it's underway, or if it's not yet started. Every box that has a number, where it says number 1, fully implement, we have a full page that I did not copy for you because it's another 13 pages of paper. But we have a full page that we will use to update every month on who's got the point, who's got the star, as Nancy calls it, and what progress is being made, what current activities are underway, what do we need to remember from work that's already been done, and what are the change indicators that are going to tell us that we're making progress on this. This document will be probably finalized on December 17th at their monthly meeting, and then I will send you a copy as courtesy so that you can actually see how it's monitoring each of these pieces.
Who else will get this document?
All the boards, like the Higher Ed Coordinating Board, the OEIB Board, the State Board of Ed, all of the agency heads, and anybody else that wants it. Plus, it will be part of the OEIB initiative under college career readiness so that it's a public. We may have to be thoughtful about names in the document. Right now it's got some names in the to-do lists, so we may be thoughtful about what goes public on that.
Would you say again, when you were finished summarized, you said they will be using this to track
The
their
cross-sector group.
cross-sector
This is
group? Okay.
This is made up of kind of like the agency heads next in command, the people who are charged with doing the work. And making sure that nobody drops the ball. What we discovered was a lot of people were working on things, but they didn't even know about each other's work. So we had to spend the first 6 months just educating ourselves. So we had presentations on the CIS. This is why a lot of the discussion today is coming forward to you, because we realized if we didn't know about it, then perhaps you all are not aware of what's happening and where the gaps are. Okay?
I have a question. Would superintendents find this of value?
That's a good question.
I think so, don't you think?
I do, definitely, and I like what you've done, Hilda, to consolidate all of these initiatives. What might be nice is, as this evolves, is to add a column on who's responsible for it.
So I'm going to show you, I'll pass this over to you. Here's just a sample. This is, okay, you're looking at element 1. You're looking at element 2. Nancy has element 3, 2 pages for Nancy. And then Mark, you've got element 4. So you can kind of see how we've laid it out. It starts with the what and the why, and then the second one is who's the lead, who else is engaged in this work that we need to keep informed, and then what's the background, current activities. So we do have names kind of attached to it.
So are
Okay.
you thinking, Mark, though, that if for superintendents, well, in maybe any group, like knowing which agency is really taking point?
Yes.
Or is that possible? Is
We
it-
know that by virtue of the people, so
You
you're
do.
right that we need to spell that out and say what the agencies are. So
We
like,
probably don't need the names on this
yeah,
chart.
we'll put
just
the agencies.
Okay, so basically what this is, so if I look at number 4 that you gave me, increased high school graduation rate, this document is kind of the who, what, where, and how to number 4.
Right.
In each one of those bullets aligned to these bullets.
Yep.
Right.
And we may add to it as we uncover additional barriers or work that has to be done.
So in answering long answer to a short question of Kay, would superintendents find this interesting? I think they'd find this interesting. The ones that they, I'm just thinking a great discussion for our region would be, is to pull out number 4 and to go through this.
And there may be, what's interesting is I think if I were reading it, I might have something in my own district that I'm doing.
Mhm.
We've tried to sort of say, what are we doing as a state around policies or changes that needed to be made. So it could be with an invitation to what are the things that you think need to be the state's responsibility.
You know, as I'm just thumbing through this and thinking of the equity lens on this, and we just came across what we feel is a real equity lens implementation point, and that's FAFSA.
Yep.
If you really look at who applies for and completes, not goes through an exercise, but completes FAFSA, it's not our middle 40 kids. It's not, it's you know, our same group of kids that we can imagine. And if we're looking at equity, I noticed that you said Aspire in here. Might be nice to put in FAFSA as a specific activity. And what we're finding is by doing it in January, we're giving the most kids shots at scholarships that are lost by the end of January after tax time.
So Aspire has a FAFSA completion pilot?
Yes, it does. But I just, you know, and I think, you know, the tie to the equity lens, that as we look at these activities, it isn't doing more of the same for the same first 40 kid.
Yep.
That might be something that we look at, that they're, you know, just as you evolve and play with these things over the years, you start seeing where the equity issues come out.
This was part of the budget ask from the Higher Ed Coordinating Commission to extend that FAFSA completion project. One of the things that we could ask for is the disaggregated data from that pilot to see whether or not it truly made the difference for those students. Would you like that?
I would. I mean,
I think that's
FAFSA.
excellent.
Yeah. I can tell you who's completing FAFSA, and they're not necessarily the ones that qualify for it.
Well, my understanding, I haven't looked at that form for a long time, but my understanding is that it's very complicated and that it requires a certain amount of sophistication. And the support for addressing that sophistication isn't there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
I will tell you that the federal government, when they get to the reauthorization of the Higher Ed Act, we have very strong indications that that's one of the first things they're going to do is to simplify the FAFSA form. Because they have heard from everybody that it is not
It's
a useful form.
It's an equity issue.
So I'm also thinking about our first agenda item, Smarter Balance proposal for the placement. Is that on
It
there?
is on one of these.
Okay.
Yep.
You know, and you know, Hilton,
Probably, Plan 5, promote use of better college career readiness assessments and curriculum interventions.
and I know it's in here, but knowing you, I mean, your meticulousness, all you have to do is point it out to me. It's not a matter of if, it's where. Where would the Eastern Promise scale-up be, the replication?
Under accelerated options, which, I'm sorry you didn't get that one to look at.
That's fine.
Number 7.
Number 7,
Okay.
it's listed there.
And then number 6 is where we're taking on the Math 95 issue.
It is on there, Math Pathways, yep,
Okay.
and 95. I just don't want to, the committee is still refining these, and they'll be looking at it December 17th and making sure where we have holes that we filled them. So it's not a formal document, it's still in draft format.
This is fantastic, because it's the first time I've seen that we're kind of reining in all of these separate, isolated events in Oregon, trying to put them into one cohesive package and delegate who does what. Good job.
So I'll just take a little bit of time and look more closely, but I think I just want to make sure all of the issues around placement is there. So Smarter Balance is one of them, but last time we brought up the idea of, is there any analysis being done on the compass and the,
Calculation.
I don't know, is that the part
That's
that?
another one.
Okay, so one of the questions that I've recently learned is a barrier for many of our students is the, what do you call it? The electronic adaptive feature. Because once kids can't answer a lower level question, it boots them out of all higher level questions. So making an assumption, they can't answer those. So just to call that out again, we see some of our kids who passed AP exams being remanded to remedial classes, and we know they don't need that. So one issue is, are all kids prepared, but the other is when they're prepared, are they still getting the opportunity to move forward? So each time I hear about the Compass and the process, at least specifically for the community college our kids go to, I learn about one more aspect of it. So I just don't know if anyone's doing a full analysis of
It's
all
on your
the
January
behaviors.
agenda.
Okay.
It's happening.
So they may not have all of the analysis completed, but you're going to have conversations with all of the folks in January that are working on developmental education.
Perfect. Thank you. I can let go of it. till
So
January.
with that, you
Got
kind of
3 weeks.
see how we've been able to cluster, as Mark said, different activities that are either useful in guiding or informing the state around what needs to occur to improve outcomes for students. And so the rest of today's agenda all sort of hang together. I don't know if there's a good title for it. I kind of call it all of the other things that surround the student and help them make good choices around college and career.
You're so close to moving forward, and this will be the last
Okay,
one on
okay.
this. I'm assuming in number 6, when we look at the Math 95 issue, that is there going to be work to have common cut scores in the community colleges?
For,
If they're going
Smart
to
balance.
use, if they're going to use Compass,
Oh,
it would be, or AccuPlacer, or God forbid, Smarter Balance. Everybody has the same cut score.
that's where your discussion in January is going to focus.
Okay.
We have to get the right people in the room to talk with you about that.
Okay.
and that's under number 6, you said. Okay. All right. Anybody have any other comments from the committee members on the phone?
So what I'd like to do is set the context for agenda items 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, and invite the first person to come up and start getting ready. So the very first thing that we had discussed, well, not the first thing, but one of the things we had discussion about in our statewide group was the fact that, my goodness, don't we have a requirement on the books for every student to complete a personalized learning requirement that includes some components around planning for college or career and thinking about how they demonstrate some of those other college-ready skills. And so we were delighted when we teamed up with the Regional Education Lab, which is housed at the Education Northwest, and their Oregon College Career Readiness Research Alliance, because we found these colleagues who were already doing great work in uncovering some of the research, best practices, etc. So it's with pleasure that we introduce and welcome Michelle Hodera. You have heard from Michelle before. She was the one that brought you some insights about developmental education outcomes for high school students. So welcome back.
Thank you.
You were sent a report, a short but succinct, personalized learning research and promising practices from across the country. We've asked Michelle not to repeat what you read, but to really engage you with what she thinks are the top level takeaways and getting your insights, questions, and thoughts.
Yeah, so the personalized learning requirements in Oregon are, Oregon has a graduation requirement that many states across the country have. And you can see on page 9 listed all the states that require a plan to plan for post-secondary life. And what came about from some talks with people at the Oregon Department of Education is that it's not, there's a lack of understanding around how well these requirements are being implemented across the state. And so we wanted to dig into that a little bit. So first we looked at the research, and that's what you have here. And the research just lays out some of the benefits of planning, and there's some non-academic skills that students gain from thinking about what they want to do after high school, and those have to do with communication, motivation, thinking about taking more rigorous coursework, thinking about how their coursework aligns with their post-secondary goals. It builds relationships with school staff. So we found some of that, and then we found some best practices from other states around personalized learning. One thing that it's something that, is a long-term process that has to start sometimes as early as elementary school, but usually middle school, and continues throughout students' high school, and so that students can reflect on what their goals are, and create some plans for reaching those goals. So we looked at, specifically we looked at 2 states, Iowa and Kentucky, and we selected those states because they have similar per pupil funding as Oregon. And we saw some of the things that stood out to us from those 2 states were that, so they both have the same electronic platform across the state that students can use to document their post-secondary plans, explore careers, upload resumes, plan for college. All sorts of things can be stored in this electronic platform, and it's something that parents can access, teachers can access, similar to what I think Laura will present in a bit on the Career Information Systems, CIS. And then the other thing we found is that there's a lot of professional development opportunities, it seems, around these platforms in these 2 states. And one other thing was that there is a focus on kind of starting in elementary school and with post-secondary planning all the way up through high school. So that was one part of what we looked at, was the research. Does anyone have any questions about that?
Here, just some clarification for me. So every high school student in Oregon that graduates is required to have this personal plan?
Yes.
And that's documented?
Yes.
That's how you collect the data?
So no, so the first part was just research, and then we kind of did a qualitative interviews with people across the state to find out how these requirements are being implemented. But yeah, the requirement is that students have an education plan and profile, that they engage in career-related learning experiences, and that they engage in an extended application, which is usually like an intense presentation their senior year about their career interests.
But that data is not collected by...
I'm just going to say, I don't think there's a monitoring process, so it's left to each district and schools.
Then I will follow that up. If there isn't an accountability system, are we sure that kids of color and those individuals that have been a part of that achievement gap are required to have that plan, and is there somebody monitoring that?
No, and that's one of the big challenges.
It's an Assurance 22, is it not, Yvonne?
It is.
It's one of the...
So the districts monitor themselves.
The districts monitor, and you sign off that you did it, okay? So there's no reporting to this ODE except on a list of, yep, we did that for our kids.
No spot checking? I mean, I think this is an area that we need to have information on.
Yeah, I'll just give my opinion from the K-12 perspective. This is a very tough one for school. It's an add-on for schools because counseling positions have been cut, working with individual kids have been cut. It's not, in my opinion, and there's islands of excellence, of course, but in my opinion, it's one of those things we just need to do just to get our kids graduated. It's not necessarily a systemic event building through high school. It's guiding your course selection, guiding your CTE options, your college options. It's an add-on paperwork.
And I think it depends on the district, having been in different districts. I know in our district, it's a pretty robust strategy, but I agree that it is an add-on. I don't know that we do any kind of analysis of the data to see, for example, how helpful is it for kids of color, second language students, and so on. I think there's a lot we could learn about it, and I just spent some time with my high school team this week to learn more about where are we currently after all the cuts, and clearly some of the things that Mark just mentioned. You know, we don't have enough counselors. We don't have enough guidance counselors. We don't have enough counselors, period. We also have class sizes that are pretty large, so being able to monitor and help and give kids the guidance that they need becomes a challenge. But it is real important to us, and the opportunities for kids to get job shadowing and that kind of thing. I do know that in our school district we make sure and monitor that every single student gets that opportunity. I don't know to what extent that happens in every high school across the state.
But I think it kind of needs a redesign, that it isn't one more thing, rather it's how we do business. And I think revisiting that, I'm jumping ahead of your research, you may contrast that, but right now, it's an add-on rather than let's use this to guide our kids to post-secondary.
I think that's it's an important question for me, and I think it's also an important question for students, because often the inspiration for aspiration comes from a one-on-one communication that first, this is what you've done and this is where this could lead you. And if we're leaving that to chance, I understand the barriers, but I think we need to kind of redesign what we think is important to make sure that we are making the kind of efforts that help students to really aspire to do something through high school and then after high school. I think that is our role here.
So I just was asking, maybe Hilda or maybe Michelle, you know, was this a study that Education Northwest took on their own, or was there a group that sort of commissioned this work to be done with some intention of what the next steps would be?
Yeah, so we worked with a group, we call it an advisory work group, representatives from the Oregon Department of Education, OEIB, some school districts, some school counselors, and what we did is we also visited some schools to dig into the challenges, and then as a group we came up with some recommendations that we would, if we could share them with you, then you could maybe look at what is feasible to move forward with and what isn't. But we have a list, I have them here, long list of recommendations based on 3 big barriers. So one barrier that we uncovered was just a general lack of culture and value for post-secondary planning at the state, district, and school level. This wasn't across the board every single school, but just the, just forgetting about what these requirements, the value of these requirements and why we're doing them was kind of pervasive. We heard that from many different educators. And so we have a list of recommendations around building culture and value around post-secondary planning. And then the second challenge we uncovered was just a lack of district-level funding for career development and counselors, and a focus on college advising and planning. So we have a whole list of recommendations around funding and increasing professional development. And then the last was a lack of statewide accountability. So what you were bringing up about there's no monitoring of who's doing what and how. And so just we have a set of recommendations around increasing monitoring of implementation and giving some more specific feedback about actually how these requirements should be implemented. Not specific, but just some best practices for districts and schools to help them, guide them with implementation.
Getting back to the new recommendations, pretty consistent with what we're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's nice to have research back it up rather than a Vaughn and Mark's opinion all the time. Okay, your point's really well taken, and it's going to be the changing of culture for college. When I look at what we've done with the Eastern Promise, our second goal is a college-going culture, and what we've done is created a Success 101 class, which is just this.
And you're going to hear more about that in a few minutes.
Yeah, and so you'll hear about that, but again, even with that effort, this is a sidebar to that, not completely integrated into it. So it was a good mandate that makes sense, that's the right thing to do, but during the recession, the positions to implement it were the first things gone. Now counselors are dealing with crisis, not advising. And so this whole Aspire conversation we had a little bit earlier, we've got to get adults with kids, and a lot of adults trained that can work with a kid and be that pseudo-parent, hold their hand freshman year through senior.
I have a question about, are any of the states, or are we in our state working on the idea of the professional development and how it gets embedded into the general education? Because I know that having guidance counselors and counselors know how to guide kids in those one-on-one conversations is important, but to create that culture, one of the things we've talked about is whenever you take an idea and embed it in a specific position in the school districts, it doesn't really get embedded in the culture. So we're wondering, and I'll just elaborate on that just a little bit. We had a summit in our community with some business partners around college and career readiness, and more focused on career. And what we heard overwhelmingly was, would you please teach them what they call the soft skills? And we know some of that is what this work is about. How do kids know what they need to do? Do they show up at work? Do they have, the work ethic and those kinds of things? And we just think that there's part of it is about planning and preparing where I'm going to go, but part of it is also that skill development in themselves. And I don't know if that's a part of this or if that spills over into something else, but we've been asking ourselves that question. How do we, as we're moving forward with Common Core state standards, embed that in the culture? And we're working on the college going, but I'm not sure that we're really necessarily yet getting to the career skills or those soft skills that the business people are asking for.
Yeah, that was one of the, I think, benefits of post-secondary planning is that if you do it really well, students will learn those soft skills. And then there's a lot of requests from people we talk to about more professional development around how to inspire kids and build those skills. We had one career development coordinator say that the planning and sharing of a vision of what career-related learning looks like school-wide needs to occur. There's still a sense of isolation of where, when, and why career-related learning happens. And so there's a real need for whole school development around post-secondary planning and career development.
Great, thank you. Is there anything else from this committee that we did to the chart?
You're going to kind of see how every piece on this agenda
Builds.
feeds
Okay.
and builds upon this. So I think at this point, we want to invite our
Laura?
next presenter up, and this would be
Thank you,
Laura, who is been a part of the CCR cross-sector group, and she's going to walk you through something you may have to turn around to see. David and Lynn, these are the slides that you should have for CIS. And the intent of this is to show you one model that many schools are using to give you a sense of what are the attributes of it and where does it fall short perhaps, and what are the recommendations for how do you further this kind of support for students.
And my apologies, I am leaving, I'm going to have to step off the call at 11 o'clock to get to a holiday fundraising lunch for my organization. So I will review the slides and then call back if I have questions. So thank you, and again, my apologies, it's the season.
Thank you so much. Will you also, if you have questions, just send them to Hilda.
And you do have the slides in your handouts.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, please go forward.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Laura McCoy, and I'm here to describe Oregon CIS. The concept of a career information delivery system started here in Oregon, in Eugene, when an Oregon labor market economist went back to school for his PhD, and it started a national movement. And what it did is, I'm not sure I know how to use. I did.
Here you go.
Hooray! What it did is it was a way in which to make data understandable that was related to the labor market and connect it to education and vice versa. So connecting education, current education, and future educational goals to the labor market in a way that was understandable so that students could create accurate and actionable plans. So because of that, it's comprehensive. So we have information on all the middle 40 and all the different elements of training that's possible. And it reflects state structures, initiatives, and goals. So it's very resonant with what's happening at the state level. And so I'm just going to go over some examples of what that looks like. There was a report, a number of reports that come out and talk about the importance of localized information. So these are just some examples, and they're in your slides. But logging, for example, in Oregon is a very viable occupation. It's a large occupation that employs many people, whereas nationally it's very small. So for planning purposes, having this level of data can be very helpful. Recreational therapists make over $10,000 more per year in Oregon than their counterparts nationally. In terms of embedding localized information within the system, so under occupations, you can see what sort of licensing requirements are necessary, what high school classes might be useful, but also connecting it to professional organizations within the state so that students can actually visualize what it might look like if they were going to go into particular fields or join an organization. This is a scholarship. We have over 1,000 Oregon-specific scholarships in Oregon CIS that we update every year. Oregon data is updated at least once a year and often in real time. This one, 50 people applied last year, and there were 15 full-ride tuition scholarships that were provided. So almost a 1 in 3 chance for students that are interested in going to Portland Community College and the Portland State in order to teach. So it's a great scholarship opportunity. We also work with every single Oregon school, private career school, as well as 2- and 4-year institution in order to provide detailed information about program of studies offered at that school. This is a good example of a program of study that doesn't necessarily get you a degree, but it certainly meets a need. It's very Oregon. It's thanatology, and it's a 2-year program in which people learn how to use music to help people through the dying process. And it provides an international certificate, or an international credential. This is another example of how localized information can make a difference, and this is an emerging occupation called renewable energy engineers, and you can see we control for an 8th grade reading level in our high school version. This is an occupation that has a licensing certification or a licensing element within the state of Oregon, and we also have distinct training programs. And the way in which occupations are codified nationally is you have to wait until there's enough data in order for the federal systems in order to describe what an occupation looks like. And it's not always resonant with what's happening on the ground. And this is a very popular occupation here in Oregon. So CIS analysts went out and collected the data and created it. And we also have distinct training programs. There's a lot of discrepancy in the quality of training programs for these occupations. But Clackamas Community College has an agreement with OIT at their Wilsonville campus to create training for this. So this is just an example of how the analysts collect the data that can help with planning. Currently, 82% of the school districts in Oregon use CIS. You have a map in your handouts, and I have more handouts in the back. And this just provides a description by county, by Oregon school district with high schools that license CIS.
That 82% is for districts, not for the high schools.
Yes, that's for districts. So 82% of the school districts in Oregon license CIS.
You don't have the total number of high schools?
I did not bring
Okay.
that. I could follow up with that if you wanted that information.
If a district uses it, does that mean all the high schools in that district are using it?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Like 4J right now, Churchill doesn't license it, but the other 3 high schools do.
Okay.
So it just depends.
Do the community colleges use this in 4-year with their students graduating?
Yes, so once a student graduates a high school, the student can continue to use CIS really for the rest of their life through that high school license. But CIS is also used throughout Oregon's institutional sectors. So all the work source license offices use CIS, most of the community colleges, all the vocational rehabilitation offices, many veterans, well, all the veterans offices, but many nonprofits use CIS like ERCO. And so what happens is a student can really start documenting their interests, goals, intentions in middle school and have this portfolio travel with them for the rest of their lives. And different versions of CIS provide different tools. Like the high school version has different tools than the adult version. And there's a custom version for, let's say, Portland Community College has their own curriculum in CIS. Beaverton School District has their own curriculum in CIS. So depending on where that portfolio is located, it might have additional resources or tools.
Does it go all the way to the actual jobs posted?
There are links to job postings. It links to U.S. jobs, and there's also all sorts of links to Oregon-specific websites. But in terms of, like, let's say you wanted to be a respiration therapist, there is a link that you can click on U.S. jobs, and it'll go to job postings in the nation. So this is the way in which Oregon CIS is structured. You can see there's assessments under exploration, and then the final tab is the portfolio. That's where the personalization happens. But just in terms of data, we have 3 encyclopedias related to occupations. Occupations, industries, what industries are most prevalent in Oregon, what that looks like, what military occupations are available. There are 6 encyclopedias related to education. And all of these are customized to Oregon with national information. So for example, Oregon transfer policies, that has all the reverse transfers among the community colleges and the 4-year institutions. It has all the information about if I want to go to Western Oregon University or to Corbin College, who do I contact at that school to transfer in? The career learning areas is a Oregon-specific taxonomy from the Department of Education for the career and technical education programs. So for those CTE programs, it reorganizes the occupations according to that structure. And then there's 3 encyclopedias related to employment. And job success is going to address those soft skills that you guys were just talking about. What are the soft skills that help people succeed in work? Self-employment is going to link to Oregon agencies that help people start businesses. You know, it's a comprehensive information that's all interconnected. And so in terms of our data, it has to be current, it has to be comprehensive, it must be unbiased, understandable so we control for a 5th grade reading level at middle school and an 8th grade reading level at high school, relevant, customized to Oregon, and then interconnected. So in terms of people planning, all this data is connected together. So here's an example of a chemical engineer. And you can see down there under related information, do you see where it says US jobs? That's where you'd have the job postings. But you have all the information on what it's like to be a chemical engineer. And then you link to programs of study, and this will take you to the different ways you can study. From there you get the various schools in Oregon that offer that training. And in this particular instance, we'll go to Eastern Oregon. And you can see Eastern Oregon University has a 2+3 agreement with Oregon State University. So students can start at Eastern Oregon and contact people in that department and then transfer to the university or Oregon State. From here, you can get data on what it's like to study at Eastern Oregon University. A great engagement strategy is students send letters to the schools, so they start to get letters back. And then they can also look at all the scholarships, state and local, related to study in that particular area. We have that same sort of data for all different levels. So here's a computer support specialist. This particular occupation pays between $35,000 and $45,000 a year, and it's a 1-year degree. So if you want to study this particular field, you can see that there are a lot of schools that offer this training. On the coast, you have Job Corps. So we include federally licensed training programs as well as locally licensed programs. And then Road Community College has a web-based program, so you could do it by a distance. And it's just this kind of level of detail that we work with all schools on in order to make sure that people can create accurate and actionable plans in terms of transition. This is an example of the portfolio. This is a high school portfolio. And you can see that there are all sorts of different types of information that can be saved. And I went ahead and I created, and I'd like you to complete this if you can. These are the types of data that can be saved in Oregon CIS, and I'd like you to rate them as to how important they would be in order to collect that information. And what I'd like to do is then, sure, thank you. Average it out and send it to you after this, but I also want to take this to the CIS board. One of the handouts that you have is a letter from the board that talks about the current cross-sector commitment. This is the type of data and indicators that CIS collects or is collectible. Staff can use this at Oregon schools in order to identify what the most popular schools are or to create training programs, but it could also be generated in aggregate form. So as you guys, if you have initiatives that you're thinking about, you'd like some input on, we could generate this data in aggregate form. And that could be student intention-based data.
We have one little snafu with all these materials. Somehow the copy of the letter did not get printed. Do you want to kind of summarize the points of that letter?
Oh, sure. And you know, I just happened to bring copies.
Oh, you're
Good,
wonderful.
So the CIS board, so CIS was started 42 years ago. And we've always worked under a board, and the board, by our constitution, has to have a very big cross-sector representation. So CIS works on the idea of a consortium. So we have representatives from corrections, from the Department of Education, from high schools, from middle schools, from community colleges. And one of the things that the board has been aware of is all of these really exciting initiatives are happening throughout the state. Because CIS has been around for so long, they really wanted people in Oregon to know about the current cross-sector commitment. CIS has been self-funded for over 40 years, and that you have this level of current cross-sector commitment for this program is pretty unique to Oregon. So Oregon, after it started the national initiative, a number of other states became CIS states, and so there's a national network, and there's 20 other states that work together. But what's rare and unique about Oregon is just how incredibly well represented Oregon CIS and well used Oregon CIS is throughout the state. You just don't see this level of cooperation in other states, where you can start in middle school and go clear through any other institutional program pretty much.
I'm curious as to whether or not you're able to actually provide a picture of where those gaps are. I'm just sort of channeling Kay, because being able to look at, oh, the district is using it, has a lot of transfer down to how many kids, how many schools in that district, and then...
Yeah. It's so interesting because I think, as Dr. Mulvihill has mentioned, there's a lot of inconsistencies, and we work with school districts, but sometimes it's wall-to-wall implementation, right? And it's really a cultural implementation. And other times it's just in the Career Center. Or maybe just one counselor uses it, or maybe it's only the YTP, the youth transition students use it within the school. And so it really depends on how the school interprets it and the resources that are available. There are schools that work very hard to make the they use CIS as a tool to implement so it's to implement their career and college program. And there are schools that work really hard, but there's a lot of barriers. I think there's barriers in terms of accountability, just as Michelle mentioned with a lot of the research. There's barriers in terms of resources to implement this.
So how many students do, in a typical year, how many students do you think use this system?
We, last year, and I want to confirm this data, but last year, and I don't have it by high school students, but there were 70,000 portfolios that were created in the system. So 70,000 new people created portfolios in order to use CIS. The average, and I do know this data, the average length of time in which someone accesses CIS is just shy of 20 minutes. Usually 18 to 19 minutes is how long they stay on, because it's a planning site, and that's where they navigate from an OC, or they might take an assessment and then connect to an occupation, a program of study, a school, and a scholarship. Or they might use curriculum. There's a lot of curriculum in CIS that can be used as well.
My question always is, how do students and families become aware of this? Because I would imagine that that's probably where there's a deficit. It sounds like a great system. I look at the board, most of the board members come from outside of the Portland metropolitan area. I don't think any come from the Portland metropolitan area or the Tri-County area. So how do students become aware of this resource? Is it through the school system? Is it through a counselor? What is the mechanism?
That's a great question. It's institutionally driven, and that is our delivery method. And so it does depend upon the institution. We provide support materials, but it really depends on how it's communicated and what's made available. Which is, a key initiative behind the creation of CIS, which is what makes me so passionate about it, is it was removing barriers, removing gatekeepers, so that people can access FAFSA information, so they can see anything that they want to be and make that plan. It could be, if the state wanted to advertise CIS, they could do so, just driving then, if it was institutionally driven, driving people back to their counselors or back to their schools. We would love to see it advertised more. And I think that's a key part of the letter.
So I just did a little research too to see how all of these topics were working in our district, so I could have something to compare. And what I found is that we don't use this, we use Naviance. And when I asked the question, why do we use Naviance, because we have to pay for Naviance, is, I don't know, that's the one we knew about. So to me, that identifies a barrier. So we use it through the plan and profile process, which is a pretty robust process in our district. So now I need to go find out, how much are we spending? Is this free, or is there a cost?
It's not. We're
Okay.
self-funded. It is
Okay.
currently, and the board sets the licensing fees. It's currently $1 per middle school student with a minimum of $250. So those small schools out in Eastern Oregon, they pay more per student than $1.
Is that annual?
Annual. The maximum of $750 for middle school students. So the big Portland metro area schools pay less per student. For high school students, it's currently $3.25 per student with a minimum of $275 and a maximum of $2,700.
Can an individual end user get on your website and access it and pay a subscription fee, or does it have to go through an educational institution?
They can, but if that happens, I generally recommend, I tell them to go to their library. Because a lot of libraries use CIS, and they could, yes, absolutely they could. The problem with an individualized subscription is it ends, whereas if they go through an institution, then they can have it for the rest of their lives, which of course is counterintuitive, and my accountant doesn't like that at all. But that way they can continue to access the system.
Now, the reason I bring that up is we've talked a lot about kids that are not in the pipeline.
Right.
And as they come and go in and out with their lives, I'm just thinking of kids who maybe have a year at a community college, not sure what they want to do next, have a little debt. This is a tremendous resource that they probably would feel comfortable doing at home on the computer, but maybe not trekking down to PCC or Blue
Yes.
Mountain. So I'm just throwing that out as another access point for non-traditional type learners, if that's a possibility. But you're saying it is, but it'd be smarter if they went to that.
Yeah, or to the WorkSource office, or their WIA program, the Workforce Investment Act, if they're affiliated with those programs, those all licensed CIS.
Challenges, though, there's a whole list of other barriers that we've just identified by having students have to go there. So just a couple things I want to throw out there. I don't know if they're questions you can answer. I just think they're things we need to think about. When I was talking to my folks yesterday, one of the ideas was how well could it link to Synergy, which happens to be our student information system, and I'm just wondering, what does that link look like, and are there student information systems that can be linked to that as well? And I don't even know necessarily it's the advantage, but that's what my folks were asking. The other one is about if there are multiple systems like SIS and Naviance, to what degree can people cross over or combine the information? I keep thinking about the whole concept of a longitudinal database as a state, and if we want to get this information and look at the types of students that are accessing it and where those barriers are or not, we're going to have some capacity as a state if we think this is a good idea. And then the last thing I was just going to suggest is that perhaps a recommendation that could come from us is that as we recommend really taking a look at the plan and profile process, that having some kind of system, I don't know if I could use this word, be required as part of that, right? It is electronic, both this and Naviance, and I know that our district is using some, but now I'm remembering the question that came up in our conversation yesterday was, evidently there are some things that are not electronic about what we do in our plan and profile process that could be integrated into Naviance, is what my team is telling me. And so part of my question is maybe that capacity is already there in SIS, so I don't know how the two systems compare and what else could be done. So I think that's another piece we could recommend actually gets sort of analyzed and integrated into any recommendation we would want to take forward about revamping the plan and profile and how we monitor and make sure it's getting used.
Right. Now, is the Career Information System a nonprofit entity?
It's an outreach program at the University of Oregon.
Okay. I would strongly encourage you to give strong consideration to looking at the makeup of your board of directors and making it more diverse.
Oh, we are always looking for that to happen. And so if you have any suggestions or recommendations.
Well, there are lots of people out there that are resources, not just
Okay.
me, but I could encourage you to take that step.
And we might be able to, we're actually compiling some of the directories of agencies and groups that Kay is referencing, so we might be able to help you connect up with some folks.
Sure. That would be great.
Any other questions or
Very
points from the
informative,
committee?
I just have to tell you that when we looked at this, we thought, in a perfect world, if every kid used this, they would see a reason for schooling. They would see their own progress. And they'd make this connection between why am I in school and what am I going to do with my life? Will their career paths change? Of course. But that's part of growth. So I'm hoping
One
that...
of the things that's so meaningful to this type of work is you get to look at the strengths of students, the strengths of kids. You're looking at what
Yes.
they think is good and what's right and what's strong about them, how that connects. And that can be really powerful and fun. Thank you.
Great, thank you so
Thank you.
much. And so the next one is linked as well, right?
Yes,
we're gonna move
so
forward with Danny.
actually, we could have probably done this in a little bit of a different order, but as we were looking for more information about the efficacy of college and career preparation, I was linked in with some graduate students at the OSU Guidance and Counseling Program that Gene Akins coordinates, and he said, well, there's some students who are looking to do this kind of research, and so we've invited Miranda Peters to answer questions that you may have, to call out highlights from her research. We have to admit that when we heard the results, we were kind of discouraged in some ways because we don't think there's enough research out that's been done on this, but we'll let Miranda kind of give you the highlights on that.
Sure. How you doing?
Hello.
So basically we looked at 4 different areas. We looked at early college and career planning, kinder through 9th grade, so prior to high school years, the efficacy of college and career classes at the high school level, technology and student planning, and then the efficacy of career education models. And so we, based on what we saw, there was some summary of our findings. And as we probably can guess, that career knowledge increases with age, but we are seeing that some whole class career planning is really effective at the elementary school level. And individual student planning is really effective at the middle school level. And when we're looking at the efficacy, it might be even more effective than high school level. So what we're looking at is that kind of early intervention and early planning with students. We also know that the most influential adults in children's worlds are their parents, and so when they're talking about their career goals and aspirations, most of those come from their family and from their parents. So even though we might wish that as educators we could carve that path for them, it's really coming from the family. And so we need to talk about as well, how do we train families to talk about career and college readiness, and kind of have those conversations very early on. And if the model of their career is not one that they're hoping for their child, how do they have more access to other models for career? So that's what we saw for those younger kids. What we are finding though with these studies is that we're looking a lot at attitudes and not outcomes. So we're looking at, did the kiddo like being in the guidance class about college and career? Yeah, they liked it, right? But we don't know if that really changes the outcome or their path and trajectory. And that's true across the board. So it's not just these elementary kids, are we looking at attitudes or outcomes? We're looking at that all the way through graduation. A lot of the studies that have been done so far are looking at attitudes and short-term effects. So 3 weeks ago you finished this course. Tell me, what did you think about it? That's the data that we have. We don't see so much, did this change your goals, or did you graduate on time, or whatever. So quick recommendations is, as you can imagine, having more whole class planning at the elementary level, doing some training with parents, making sure we're doing one-on-one career planning by the middle school level. And of course, professional school counselors are trained to do that, so trying to figure out a way to support the counselors to get in there. Any questions or thoughts about that little first piece? Seems pretty logical. So then we looked at the efficacy of college and career classes at high school, and what we found is that they have at best a moderate, more likely a minimal impact on student career knowledge and self-efficacy. So again, we're not looking at outcomes, and most of the data that we have on these classes is produced by the companies that produce the curriculum. So we're not doing empirical studies on these. We're looking at what did the companies want us to see as far as outcomes are concerned. Again, they're short term. And so we need some more data and outcome research from third-party folks. Questions about that?
I'm just curious in terms of the doctoral program, to what degree this maps out into a series of dissertations or even theses at the master's level that would help fill those holes for us.
Yeah, there's a lot of holes that need to be filled. For example, I'm in a doctoral program. Of the students, we have now 9 in my cohort. 3 of us are school counselors. So there'd probably only be 3 of us within this cohort that would even move towards studying that area. There's not going to be a critical mass of researchers out there, but we can really, if we have the support, if we know that there's, if we can get the data, it's always getting numbers. If we can get the data and we can get through our dissertations because we have the data, I can see some folks really pushing that way. And then we do have multiple master's programs within our state for school counseling, and there is a push to do more of the college and career readiness and training for our school counselors. So I see that push happening, especially at that master's level.
Do you know if anybody has identified the kind of data and maybe the additional things we need to do? So I'm thinking back, Kate, to your question about the whole monitoring of everything we're doing in terms of the planet profile, the SIS systems, all of that. I'm just wondering, are there some barriers to even researching it because there's not even any regular requirements or any mechanisms for collecting that data at district level? So part of it is collecting it, part of it is getting it to you.
Mm-hmm. I was looking very specifically in these research topics, so I wasn't looking at that specifically. My best guess to find empirical data and research on that, you'd almost have to do a case study and look at a system that uses all these different tools and strategies and what is the outcome. So if there might be something out there, but my best guess is because there's so many different ways to collect data, looking at case studies within maybe districts or high schools would be
one.
And this is David. Maybe my colleagues can help me on this. Are career and college courses, are they required in high schools? Are they optional? And if they're optional, how popular are they? And is this connected anyway with the personal learning we were learning about earlier?
So I think it is directly tied, and I know for our district it's a required course, but I don't think that's true everywhere.
And what I saw with the studies that were done, they were done so differently. So a course could be offered just as a summer class. So the kids who actually show up for that summer class would get that course, but the kids who are maybe working over the summer wouldn't be in that course. So there's so many different ways to deliver.
That's kind of ironic.
Right. And then another is kind of the dosage. Are we looking at every week for an entire semester, or are we looking at like a weekend class? The dosage has a huge impact as well, and that's why we didn't see really large effect sizes, is because the dose of the classes typically are pretty small. They're doing maybe half an hour a week for 10 weeks, something like that.
Any other questions from the committee?
I wanted
And
to also.
are they connected at all with that personal learning requirement? I know it seems from the remarks earlier in this meeting that's somewhat open to interpretation by districts how they do that, but do you know any that are using that?
So in Forest
Using a
Grove, I
career
know that
college
we
class?
are. I know there are other districts, I just don't know how many or what others are using it with that.
There's a need. Find that out.
Exactly, information.
Lots of research
idea.
topics in this
Thanks.
topic. Sorry, David, did I cut you off? Did you have something more to say?
It's a good idea.
No, I just said it would be a good idea to get a little more information as we're looking at this, about what we can do in the state.
Great.
And I also wanted to acknowledge that Miranda Peters was also joined by Deanna Garcia. Valdez, who was also part of the research team, and they presented this work in more detail to the Oregon School, they provided me with information which I shared with the Oregon School Counselors Association. Miranda was acknowledged this year as, what was the?
Oregon
School counselor.
School Counselor of the Year.
And then also both of them came and shared the full array of their work with the cross-sector group that we've been talking about. So we just thought that it would be great to have Miranda. Deanna had exams or something that precluded her from joining us today, but we really appreciate that.
You know, I'm also thinking about, definitely we need the research, but we also need this information to get out about the need for research, and I'm thinking about the other opportunities like OLN and the ELL conference and OALA. It'd be great to have a presentation where it's more than a presentation, but it's an opportunity to explore those questions from an equity lens about, you know, the fact that we have this requirement, but that there's all these gaps in ensuring that kids use it, it's helpful, and so on. It would be a great place to bring up what are all the questions and how could we structure some research groups to do that.
And I'll
We could do
say,
that as a state.
as someone who is looking for the research, it'd be nice if that's published, if that becomes accessible so that we can keep working from that. I'm guessing that there's more data out there, more research out there, but hasn't been published through a journal. It hasn't been put in a way that we can access easily. So as we're asking for more research, that research needs to be published so that we can use it in later times. And when I was looking at a lot of these things, I wasn't looking specifically only at Oregon. So if we start that here, we're also kind of making a name for ourselves here in Oregon and what we can do as a state.
That's great.
So we also wanted to use this sort of next piece to give a real highlight to something you're already familiar with, that you've heard about through the Eastern Promise, and that is that not only are they looking at opportunities for students to acquire college credits, but they've really made a commitment to a college. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm not sure she finished her presentation.
I can be done.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I'm just checking in. I'm just looking at what slides up and
Go
just
ahead.
wanted to see if there were any more points.
Well, I think the only other thing, we looked at technology and we looked
that's
at
right.
CIS and Naviance and all that, and the same thing came to us where we have very little outcome studies to look at. We're looking at the data that those organizations provide, maybe some guidance that they provide, but it's not empirical research data. So it's just more of the same.
And linked a little bit to the CIS conversation. I
Yeah.
think. So, thank you very much. And I do have to say, we are proud to have Miranda in our school district.
Thank you.
Not just because she won an award, but because she's an awesome counselor.
Absolutely, and I apologize for cutting that last part off there. But
It's okay, we're ready to move forward now.
We do know that Danny Milkey is on the phone and joining us, and we asked him to sort of summarize not only what Eastern Promise is doing around creating a college-going culture, but any lessons learned, things that that this subcommittee should be thinking about as you consider crafting recommendations for broader policy. So Danny, are you with us?
I am.
And so Danny,
Do you?
the floor is yours.
Are you gonna-
I think probably the narration of this is going to be just a narration. So you have freedom to kind of go where you want to go with this. There are not corresponding slides up.
Okay. So as part of our Eastern Promise project, we have two overall goals. One is to increase the early access to college credit for students, which we've done through our credit by proficiency model. And our second goal is to increase the college-going culture in the region. And we always qualify that by saying the college/post-secondary culture. And so we started that with implementing a program that we call Academic Momentum. That program begins at 5th grade. And the hallmarks of that program are that each student completes a compact that's signed by the student, their parents, and the school. And the compact basically addresses that they're going to be a good student. They're going to do the things that will prepare them academically to be successful in school, and that they'll be supported by both their family and by the school to achieve these things. As they move through 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade, each year there's a particular curricular component that we have for this program. We started off borrowing some things that we found on other places, and then this past summer we put together our own curriculum with the help of one of our counselors in the region who just completed a doctorate, and their dissertation, oddly enough, was dealing with 5th grade students. So we really feel confident that we've put something together that's working well. Each year that compact is renewed for the students, and then when they hit 8th grade, they move forward and move into what we call our Success 101 program. Our Success 101 program at the 9th grade is currently in 22 different schools in the region. In each of those schools, it is a required course, and the students also receive 3 college credits for their participation and successful completion in that course. Let me jump back to our academic momentum for just a moment. Currently, we have 20 school districts. We have 42 schools, that's 36 elementary and 6 middle schools involved. We have 150 educators that have been trained in implementing this, and that accounts for 3,550 students that are involved in our academic momentum program. With our Success 101 last year, we had 18 districts, we now have 22, and we had last year 519 students who earned 1,557 credit hours.
In just that one course?
Just Success
Sorry?
101.
Just that one course? Yep.
Right, yeah.
That's great.
So really in a quick overview, those are the things that we're doing, and maybe it would be easier to have people address some questions.
Mark, do you want to highlight anything before we jump into questions?
Yeah, I think what was interesting is how we implemented the program, and the good news is the research aligns very well to it. Whole group instruction at the elementary level, training the teachers for that, having them integrate into other curricular areas, more of a specific class in middle school, a very specific class starting the freshman year. And, you know, Danny, what was interesting, I mean, there's no surprise here, but one thing that has naturally evolved with Success 101 in watching it actually being implemented is that peer component that you identified, how important it is for high school kids to be talking with one another. They influence each other on everything, but this particular career thing. And so, you know, when you go into the Success 101 classes, you really see that quite well.
And I'll mention that one thing that's distinctive about, we're using the Career Choices curriculum for this program, which highlights the 10-year plan model. And it's unique nationally. Data from the program is pretty strongly evidence of the success that they've had in increasing graduation rates and going on to post-secondary rates in the schools. So we're really happy with the program and the outcomes that we've experienced so far. I would add that in our academic momentum program at the 5th grade level, all of the 5th grade classes that participate come to Eastern Oregon University for a day at various times through the year. This year, it's kind of a unique thing. We're going to have the Portland Opera is going to be there for 3 days, and we're bringing in almost all of our 5th graders to participate in that. That'll be a great thing for them. And then at the 7th grade level, they visit our community college partners.
I have a question. First of all, we'd love to be able to include a copy of the compact. I didn't think to ask you for that, but I think that would be a useful document for the committee and for us to put online with our materials. And secondly, have you gotten to a point yet where you can tease out the impact of each intervention, if you will, with particular groups of students by population?
Well, not really. And let me address that. We're in our 3rd year of implementing the Success 101 program at our first school, which was Pendleton High School. All the other schools are in their 2nd year. So we've got 1 more year to see the graduation impact of that program on that group of students. And then we started the 5th grade program likewise 3 years ago. So those students who started are now in 7th grade, moving into 8th grade. We do have data that we can look at for the impact of the students who participated in the Success 101 program and what impact that's had on their high school. But looking at the whole experience of moving through, that first group of 5th graders are the high school graduating class of 2020.
Yeah, I was really thinking about the college success because there's been some discussion in other groups about the importance of that being a dual credit course that would be included and incentivized by some of the accelerated learning work.
And we've been at it 3 years, so this year's seniors at Pendleton will be the first one that we can track going into next year. They were the first pilot school district, and it's kind of exploded since then. So we're probably 2 years away, and we're working with Ed Northwest to set the stage to start getting that longitudinal data. One piece of data that is interesting, every one of our kids that earned an Eastern Promise credit, we have 100% high school graduation rate.
Wow.
Kind of interesting. And it's not just the first 40 either. That was kind of a cool statistic. Danny, if you could talk a little bit about the compact and how that's done at an assembly, and then what EOU's commitment to that was.
Sure. So the compact is generally introduced by an assembly meeting that the schools conduct. They can certainly do it any way that they want to, but that compact sets up a commitment, if you will, on the part of everyone involved to hopefully address the success of the students. And as part of that, at EOU, what we've done is implemented what we call the Eastern Promise, Eastern Oregon University Academic Momentum Commitment or Compact, and all those students who begin in 5th grade and go through all of the pieces of the program. So they go 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, Success 101 in 9th grade, carry on through high school and graduate from high school. So the students who reach that point and apply to EOU and are accepted, they will receive a $500 per term scholarship as part of our commitment to what they've done, being part of our overall program.
And that's codified to span changes in administration and everything else.
We've been asked that, and we're holding tight to it. That was a commitment that we made to those parents and those kids. We need to make it happen.
Very good. Great. Any more questions or comments from the committee?
Just one sidebar about engaging community. You build a vehicle, field of dreams, they will come. And now we're seeing very creative outside-the-box thinking by communities to support the program. For instance, service clubs are moving away from the traditional $100 scholarship for one kid to go on to Stanford. Rather, we'll pick up all of the Eastern Promise credit by proficiency classes at $10 a credit for more kids, and we'll target a middle 40 kid. We're also seeing a commitment from many of our communities to invest in Success 101 and academic momentum. So, it's an example that once it's out there, communities do respond for the kids. If you have an avenue and you can communicate an avenue, and what academic momentum have done and credit by proficiency, the two critical arms of Eastern Promise, is it's now engaged a broader audience who now have a vehicle to work with and become creative.
We saw the same
And I'll add that we've implemented this across the region, but it's really having an impact on our underserved populations in Umatilla, Morrow, and Malheur counties that are increasingly. They have increasing numbers of Hispanic students in their school systems to the point where some classes are approaching 100%. And so we're committed to have those students to be successful through this program.
Great. Thank you so much, Danny. I'm assuming no more questions, comments? We have one more item on the agenda. Jean, are you going to introduce that?
About the time that our last meeting was being held, a little bit before that, Gene and I had been talking, and he had received an opportunity to go to one meeting sponsored by the White House and Michelle Obama particularly, and then had an opportunity to take a whole team to another meeting. And unfortunately, it was the same date as our meeting, but Gene has brought back a report from the 26 people that accompanied you. So it's an opportunity to hear, and there is a handout 12.0 that accompanies his presentation.
So thank you. I'd like to first share with you some comments about previous presentations. So I have 28 years of experience as a high school counselor, 23 at Lebanon High School, and I still remember the day when we got CIS and we finally had hardware, computers that we could run it. And I called one of my good friends and I said, I feel like I've died and gone to high school counselor heaven. I'm actually able to get online and do some of these things that I used to have to get out the big handbooks, occupational outlook handbook, etc., and use. The other comment I would share, I spent 3 years part-time at West Salem High School. In my second year at West Salem High School, I was the 9th grade counselor. And so Elsa Plant, who was our career specialist, and I had all 360 9th graders spend 4 days in the computer lab and do CIS. And so to your question about kind of who makes it happen, I think high school counselors who are committed to make it happen, just like Elsa and I did. The other thing I did was have parents come in to the band room where I could put it all up on screen, because one of the great things about CIS is that parents could access their students' information at home. And so I wanted the parents of my 9th graders to see how they could sit down with their son or daughter and look at what their son or daughter had put in that folder. So just an excellent tool, and I always, and on Friday, then I was down at the Chemeketa Center for Business and Industry with 14 students in our master's program, and one of the activities I had them do was go into CIS and do what's called the Transferable Skills Assessment. So every year I've taught career at Oregon State, also taught career at Lewis and Clark. I get access for CIS for our students. So Laura will remember when I called and left a message, Laura, help, I need to have my students at OSU have access to CIS. So second comment, research. Appropriate people to do that research are school counselors and PhD programs. So just an example, Laura Owen, at the time she did her PhD work, she was the director of counseling in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We have a hybrid PhD program where people can fly in. We've had people school counselors fly in from New York City 16 times. The 17th trip that Charles made to PDX was to then drive down to Corvallis and walk across the floor of the stadium and get his PhD. Laura Owen did her PhD research on a very large FAFSA project that was being done in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Danny referred to Michelle Jensen. So Michelle Jensen's elementary school counselor in Hermiston, Oregon, and Michelle's research was on college-going self-efficacy of 5th graders. April Dominguez, high school counselor, Tehachapi High School, California. April said, my biggest concern is I have 1/3 of my sophomores repeating 9th grade algebra. Kind of a common problem across the United States, also in Oregon. Michelle did a single subject research design on math anxiety reduction to help students do better. So we need more school counselors doing PhD programs, because they're the ones who can generate the research that you want to have done. We have in the cohort behind Marinda, we just have one Oregon school counselor. We have a Washington school counselor, and I know that we'll get a school counselor out of Oregon City applying to our next cohort PhD. So the team that went to San Diego State. So at the top, I've shared a little bit of the history behind San Diego State. Starting in January, President Obama launched the College Opportunity Agenda and saw that school counselors played a key role in the economic policy, and that in that school counselors are seen as the people who have that role in working with students from lower SES families and then help those students matriculate to post-high school education and then have a higher socioeconomic status than did their parents. So then with Michelle Obama's Reach Higher initiative, and she was a keynote speaker at the American School Counselor Association, I now refer to First Lady Obama as the spokesperson, national spokesperson for school counselors, because she continues to say in her speeches that student counselor ratios of 475 to 1 are outrageous. In Oregon, even a little more outrageous. We're at 522 to 1 at this point in time. We went from about the middle of the pack about 10 years ago to now there are only 8 states with worse student counselor ratios than we have. So White House convening on strengthening school counseling and college advising. First one held back at Harvard on July 28th. Second one hosted at San Diego State University November 17th and 18th. And we were able to take a team of 25 from Oregon. People like Rob Hess, Superintendent of Schools in Lebanon Public, Kim Patterson and Janelle Ives from ODE, Stephanie Carnahan, Oregon Gear Up, Lori Ellis, Oregon Aspire. And we had some just amazing conversations, and I'll highlight just a few. One that was near and dear to my heart is after we came back, Kim Patterson and Janelle Ives at ODE said, with our PLC training that we've been doing, we've not had a strand for school counselors. Starting in 2015, we're going to have a strand for school counselors. So then, one of the primary areas of focus with the White House has been, let's put universities in partnership with school districts. And so we went to San Diego State knowing that there would be a partnership between Lewis and Clark School Counseling Program and the Hillsborough School District, and that the program that I run, the school counseling program at Oregon State, we had already talked about a partnership with the Corvallis School District and the Lebanon School District. So then after that, we were given an opportunity to nominate leaders representing Oregon State and then the Hillsborough School District to go to a White House College Opportunity Day of Action last Thursday. So on December the 4th, President Ed Ray represented Oregon State at the White House College Opportunity Day of Action, and a team of people representing the Hillsborough School District were back there. So the focus, I mentioned the K-16 partnerships around college readiness, but also investing in high school counselors as part of the First Lady's Reach Higher initiative, increasing the number of college grads in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and math, and then just building networks of colleges that would promote college completion. So a couple of other pieces that we have brought back, and that is with the 5 programs preparing school counselors. So we have Oregon State University, Corvallis, Oregon State University, Cascades and Bend, Lewis and Clark, George Fox, Northwest Christian, and Portland State. So at each of the programs, we're encouraging the staff to focus more on preparing school counselors to do college and career readiness for all students. One area of focus. Second area of focus is I've been dismayed at TSPC. We have a Tier 2 licensure requirement for school counselors, but those graduate credits could be in underwater basket weaving as long as they're graduate level credit. And so there's a team, excuse me, a subgroup of the team that went to San Diego State saying we've got to approach TSPC and say that the majority of those Tier 2 licensure credits have to be on college and career readiness. Third major area of focus, we have slightly over 1,100 school counselors practicing in Oregon. We need to provide professional development for those 1,100 practicing school counselors on college and career readiness. The surveys that have been done nationwide of school counselors typically indicate that they do not feel really well prepared to do everything required for college and career readiness. Other conversations, just as the Ed Northwest report says, if you're going to do education plan and profile, you need to increase the number of school counselors. School counselors typically are the ones who will do the education plan and profile. So Rob Hassan, school superintendent in Lebanon, said, let's focus on trying to get at least a 10% increase in the number of school counselors.
For his district?
Pardon?
For his district?
And he's already doing that. But he's saying, let's try to get it at the state level, see if we can't get some committed funding. And Hilda said that's not going to happen. But
Well, my point
yeah.
was that those decisions about how districts use their budgets are done at the local level, not at
Right.
the state level.
Right. Another very exciting conversation coming out of San Diego State is why have fall conferences for the Oregon College Access Network, OSCA, the school counselors, gear up and aspire? Why not at least by 2016, let's bring all of those organizations together and talk about how can we work as a team, not in silos, but work as a team. Even include Elizabeth Cox Brand and others at the community college and college level said, let's maybe include the college admissions counselors, PNACAC, and see if we can't just kind of blow the roof off the conference facility, 800, 900,000 people all talking, college and career readiness, K-16. So I think that's going to happen. We're going to use the Oregon College Access Network as a communication hub for all of our organizations. The other piece we're going to start doing, I was just introduced last week to an online conferencing capacity called Zoom. And so we're going to try to communicate via Zoom to people from school counselors from Seaside to Ontario, and from Beaverton down to Grants Pass, Medford, Ashland, and then also use that same Zoom capacity to communicate with the 25 college and career ready thought leaders and kind of keep the momentum out of San Diego State moving forward. Two other pieces I have to address. One is the majority of the people at San Diego State said we really want to get across the idea that college and career readiness starts in elementary school. So one of the reasons Marinda Peters is the school counselor of the year, and you can see a less than 2-minute video of her talking about the college and career work she does with the students at Fernhill Elementary. And you can also see a video of Michelle Jensen talking about the work that they do in Hermiston with 5th graders. And then the last point I would make is pretty much consensus that kids probably are not going to be ready to talk about college and career if their mental health needs are not also at first addressed. And again, my belief is that that has to happen at the elementary level. I will say here what I often say in other settings, and that is that I hope to live long enough to see the day that if we have another school shooting in Oregon, that instead of talking about metal detectors and school resource officers, we talk about elementary school counselors to address the needs when they're this small rather than like this. One of the states that's looking at a significant increase in funding for school counselors is Colorado. The director of counseling in Denver Public is in our DOC program, and the bad news out of that push is that Colorado leads the nation in school violence, school shootings, and so a big impetus for increasing the number of school counselors, not about college and career, but about let's reduce the school violence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions from the committee? We're just about ready to wrap up. All right, and I do believe we do not have any public testimony. Okay, so our next meeting is January 13th from 10 to 12, and the place is to be announced. We don't know that yet.
Still TBA. It will be
It will be in Portland. All right,
That will be our next OEIB meeting, right? Correct. Okay.
on the same day. All right, so I am going to adjourn us. It is now 11:58. Thank you very much for those of you who joined us today.
Thank you for all of the folks that made the effort
Thank
to
you.
come and share in this integrated presentation.